Alaska's bush rat governor weighs in on subsistence. Governor Knowles' chief of staff is resigning soon and reflects on the job he's had for the past 7 years. And we have a 9-year-old's perspective on a holiday tradition. Welcome to Alaska Week for Friday, December 14th. I'm Dave Donaldson. Those stories coming up. But first, a look at some of the major events of the past week. As is often the case in Alaska history, be it fur, gold, war, or oil, decisions made far away from here can have a huge impact on the state. Yesterday, President Bush served formal notice that the United States will withdraw from the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. That will allow the U.S. to press ahead with a missile defense program starting next spring, with construction of missile silos and a new command center at Fort Greely, southeast of Fairbanks. The President called the ABM treaty obsolete, and he said the September 11th attacks make it more urgent than ever to scrap it.
We know that the terrorists and some of those who support them seek the ability to deliver death and destruction to our doorstep via missile. And we must have the freedom and the flexibility to develop effective defenses against those attacks.
Governor Knowles released his proposed state budget today, covering operating and capital expenses for the fiscal year that starts July 1st. The governor wants to increase state spending by $180 million. Much of that would be spent on education, public safety, children's health programs, and anti-terrorism measures. He also wants to give voters a chance to approve a $200 million bond package to pay for school construction and repairs. And he's calling for $136 million in debt financing to pay for fixing up prisons and other state buildings. To balance his plan, the governor must tap $1.2 billion from a budget reserve. And with that fund running dry soon, the governor says the state needs to plan to increase revenue. He promised to offer one next month during his State of the Budget address. But even with the glaring fiscal gap, Knowles says increasing demands on state services require an increase in state spending.
Safe landings are just about over. Those days are just about over. It's not a choice any longer. But we shouldn't use that as a reason to hide.
Alaska joined the nation and other countries this week in holding ceremonies to honor the victims of last September's terrorist attacks.
Now, if we could bow our heads in a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims of September 11th.
At a fire hall in Juneau on Tuesday, flanked by rescue workers, Governor Knowles declared December 11th as World Remembrance Day of September 11th.
History will look back on the year 2001 as a turning point for our great nation. After that morning of horror in New York, Washington, and a field in Pennsylvania 3 months ago today, each of us was forever changed. Americans have responded with an overwhelming sense of national pride and solidarity.
Present arms.
At the end of the ceremony, a policeman raised an American flag and an Alaska flag that had flown above Ground Zero in New York City. That's the news summary for this week. And now the fight over subsistence. The governor's panel trying to find a way to break the deadlock will meet again tomorrow here in Juneau. The group met last month in what the Knowles administration hoped was the final session. But Attorney General Bruce Botelho, who chairs the committee, says some members want to meet again to discuss a few outstanding issues. Last August, former Governor Jay Hammond floated an idea to resolve the conflict. Rhonda McBride of KAKM in Anchorage talked to him about that. What follows is a segment from her show, Consider This.
I frankly oppose an exclusive rural preference. The reason being, I'm a rural qualified subsistence user. But under a strict subsistence exclusive rural preference, you have a situation where I, for example, would be eligible to go where there a subsistence use only caribou season imposed on the North Slope. I would be eligible to go up there and participate where a Barrow native now living in Fairbanks, who had lived off those resources all his life, couldn't do so. There's something wrong with that. So it seemed to me that some mechanism that would permit people that could demonstrate a history of use and dependency and so forth, no matter where they lived, could jump through hoops and be qualified, as well as those of us who live in rural areas. Now, under the Governor Hickles task force, we had come up with a program that did essentially that, which had the support of everybody on that task force. And we had some heavy hitters from the Native community, some of the biggest names in the Native community, and the urban or the outdoor council members were on it, and we all agreed 100% with a mechanism which would accommodate certain urban people under certain conditions. But where it's been blown out of reasonable consideration is the fact that I read something the other day where somebody from northwestern Alaska, which had been allocated under a subsistence law some 20 sheep, contended that they needed them all for the local people and that they didn't want to open up even to their native brethren who may live in Fairbanks. But consider this, who in an urban area would want to go when they have a choice of going to an area which was constricted to a subsistence use only season because of a lack of game? Why would you go to area B when area A when area B is open with plenty of game and anybody can participate? But the fact that you can deny me that opportunity is enough to affront people. And I can appreciate those who don't want structured in the Constitution something that is that blatantly discriminatory, which simply says an exclusive rural preference is granted.
You know, you have
so what I proposed is simply this in that article. I said, why don't we say, make a constitutional amendment that was totally non-discriminatory but did meet the terms of ANILCA, as I discovered when I talked to Bruce Babbitt about it and bounced this off of him a few years ago. And that was this. It simply said that no matter where you live, if there was a dearth of resource in that particular game management unit, that then, and they could not supply the historical, customary, traditional level of harvest without additional constraints, then and only then would they impose a subsistence use only season and confine it to those folk who lived within that game management unit. That would treat the anchorageite exactly the same as the fellow from Bethel, insofar as if and when there was ever a subsistence use season imposed in the game management unit in which Anchorage is located, that those folk would be eligible. I would not be, unless I could demonstrate a history of usage of those particular resources. And most everybody that I talked to, including Native people and outdoor council people, said I could support that. Hey, I'd buy that. But and the task force that the governor set up, I met with them and talked to them about it, and they were interested in incorporating some of the language, and they have done so in part, but I'm not sure what their final proposal is.
Well, this is likely to go on and on. And
well, one of the major problems is, quite frankly, is that the Native community, many folk are perfectly happy with federal management. And while I think it's a delusion that they in the long term will be happy as they find more and more constraints and restrictions and unfortunate polarization between urban and rural people, that it provides a wedge between those two communities that I find very lamentable. And
Well,
I think the only way to overcome that is to retain state management of fish and game with a much heavier involvement of local people in the management of those resources.
Do you worry that if we don't get this settled soon, that as a state we're going to be in some real trouble?
Well, I lament the fact that there has been a division between the urban and rural people, and I think will only grow and aggravate if and when we do not take over federal or state management. I think as the federal management agency become more and more entrenched, and see, they can do things that we cannot do under our Constitution, and they could even create a native-only preference if they wish to do it. I understand that's the case, and that would provide even greater polarization that would divide the state even further. I think the only way to overcome that is come up with a reasonable resolution which accommodates the legitimate concerns of those who don't want a discriminatory constitutional amendment, which I think my proposal does, that accommodates federal law, and that gives the natives an assurance that their subsistence needs will be met, legitimate needs. Now, One of the other worries I have is unless you have something that says the only time you're going to impose a subsistence use only season is when the sustained yield or customary traditional use of those resources require additional constraints. Otherwise, you're going to have people agitating for a subsistence use season in areas where the harvest can be met easily and still accommodate outsiders. Example, in the area in which I live, there's roughly 1,000 people, Lake Clark, Iliamna area. Under federal subsistence law interpretation, it says that every one of us, 1,000 people, have to have a reasonable opportunity, say, to take a moose before we can accommodate folk from elsewhere. Well, the historical take has maybe been 50 or 100 moose. But suddenly, we locals could demand, wait a minute, you've got to set aside 1,000. We haven't had our opportunity yet. Don't let anybody else from elsewhere come in and hunt that area. That isn't the intent of the subsistence law, nor is it appropriate or legitimate. And until you resolve those concerns, which I attempted to do in that proposal of August 16th, I fear that it's gone beyond the point of a reasonable resolution. And now, I think some of the urban native people that have a far greater dependency than some of us live in the rural areas should be accommodated if and when they can meet certain criteria which we structured in the Hickel Task Force proposal that had 100% support. I think we ought to get back to that. I think it's the only hope of resolution, and that hope is dimming.
Those of you who live in Anchorage in south central Alaska can catch Consider This with Rhonda McBride on KAKM Thursday nights at 8:30. Now for a look at Jim Ayers, Chief of Staff to Governor Tony Knowles. As we reported last week, he's resigning January 4th after serving 7 years, the longest tenure of any Chief of Staff in state history. Ayers will stay in Juneau and become the North Pacific Regional Director for Oceana, a nonprofit group that promotes the preservation of oceans, fisheries, and marine life. We spoke to him about his job and his time with the governor. Here are some of the highlights of that interview.
I think there are people who don't have a vision that unfortunately are inside the decision-making process, and their energies go into thwarting the efforts of those who do have a vision. Some of our greatest accomplishments have been stopping bad things from happening, frankly. Some of the good things that we've accomplished, in my view, are things that aren't probably talked about every day, but Governor Knowles and Smart Start program. There was a great headline and I can't remember which legislator had said it, but they put it in the headline, I believe, in a prominent newspaper in the state, that said that Smart Start, dead on arrival. And as you recall, that was a tremendous battle, was to provide a comprehensive early childhood program, including what is now called the Denali Kid Care, but to provide health services to poor children throughout the state and families. And the Smart Start program in child protection and child care and child health has been a tremendous success. You know, there are tens of thousands of kids today that have health care that otherwise wouldn't have had it. And it was a battle, as you well know. It was a battle to the very last second in the year that we introduced it, with people clamoring all the way that, by God, it was not going to happen. And by the grace of God, it did happen. And some hard work up here. I think that we've accomplished a lot. And we came in with jobs and families as our motto and said we were going to focus on those two issues. And we've pretty much been able to stay with that mission. And unfortunately, the areas that we have not been able to succeed have been not because we weren't right or didn't fight hard enough, but because there were the few in the state Senate who were able to thwart our effort. Alex Miller, you know, and I feel in some ways almost unworthy to mention his name. And Alex Miller was a great Alaskan. He was a great person in the Alaska state history, who helped make things happen. And Alex was always very helpful to me. He helped me get my first job here. And Alex said to me, you know, there's two things that I asked him for advice one day. I said, well, how do you make things work here? How do you get the whole place to work? And Alex said, there's two things to remember. One, you'll never get your job done in the office. If you're in your office, you're not doing your job. And secondly, you know, everybody wants to be treated with respect. And any deal can be had if you find out what it is that they're interested in and they're treated with respect. You know, the unfortunate thing is, the most frustrating and tiring thing about this job as Chief of Staff is, when I first was coming to Juneau and working on children's issues and some issues as from Rural Cap, you know, people like Clem Tillian and Jay Kurtula and Johnny Sackett and Al Adams was just
The masters of the deal.
yeah. Well, he was a rookie at the time, becoming a master, Senator Adams. But, you know, those guys, you know, I think I just mentioned 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, you know, and I had to think about that. You know, those guys didn't have that mean-spirited, awful, venomous approach to getting things done, you know? And somebody said, well, yeah, but, you know, a couple of these guys now are running for governor, and they were running against your boss 4 years ago. Well, that's not true. Almost all those guys thought, almost everybody that comes in this building thinks of themselves as one day running for one of the big jobs. Mine's available, by the way. But the difference was they treated each other with respect. You know, they didn't get up on the floor and harangue about the character of one another or even the governor at the time, you know. And they went through Democrat and Republican governors, you know, Egan and Hammond and Sheffield. Those guys, you know, those guys in the legislature treated each one of those governors with respect, and they treated each other with respect. And it's unfortunate that some of the people that are in the legislature today have lost that. There's a good sign, in my view. There's some good new people in the legislature over the last 3 or 4 years, you know. Great people, Democrats and Republicans. You know, I think a lot of Lisa Murkowski and Ethan Berkowitz, you know. They're good people. And they've come into the legislature and they're concerned about the state more than they are themselves. But there are people still in the legislature that ought to get out, you know. They're bitter. And I don't know what happened to them, you know, but they're bitter and they need to get out. Governor Tony Knowles has been the mayor of the biggest city in Alaska, and he's been the governor for 2 terms, and he has ideas about what he wants done. So he is not the kind of person that's going to give me a list at dawn and then go for a walk on the beach. Governor Tony Knowles is very involved in day-to-day operations of everything from what's happening with the fish run to how many children out there are in peril in child abuse situations and calls not getting responded to. And he definitely sets those priorities and says, I want to know what we're going to do about this. But he then either gets deeper into that issue or moves on to the next issue and gets personally involved in that. So I think it depends. Certainly, you know, this governor spends a lot of time with the public. He spends a lot of time traveling in and around Alaska. He floated the Yukon a couple times, visiting villages, and he expects me to keep the doors open and the lights on while he's gone. And he expects things to get done, and he's always in contact. So I think that there are different. I think there are different approaches that governors have, and one approach is probably not necessarily better than the other. It's just what works for that particular governor. On big issues, the role I play, go back to the Chief of Staff's role. The big issue I played is I've generally been, I would say, his friend. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, and I've been his friend, and if he asks my opinion, I give it. And I've got some strong feelings about some issues. But on issues where I know that he really needs to make a personal decision, Katie John's a good example. That was way beyond politics, way beyond politics, no matter what anybody would think. That issue was an issue of heart and culture and right and wrong as far as he was concerned. And that issue and some issues are issues where we talk about it a lot. We talk about what's right for Alaska and how he feels about it. And I've tried not, in those cases where I know it's that level. It's a personal issue. It's what's good for Alaska. And I've tried to certainly, share the information that I have about the issue and my experience. But I've tried not to get in a situation where he felt that I was going to find him right or wrong in his decision. Because I think that's the danger in a job like mine. It's not being the shadow governor, but it's when you start to think you're the shadow governor and you start to try and influence decisions for whatever reason that you've gotten yourself in a pretty tough spot. And I think you're not serving the governor at that point.
Juneau is one of the few capitals in the United States where every December the governor opens up his house to the public to celebrate the holidays. Thousands of people show up for a tradition that's been going on for 88 years. This year was no exception, as we hear in this report by special correspondent Callie Connerton.
Hi, I'm Callie Connerton. Welcome to a holiday event of the year at the governor's house. There's lots of entertainment here at the governor's house. As you can see, there's some bells playing. Pretty, huh? Look at all these wonderful treats made by Chef Stephanie. I think I'll try one.
We have 12,500 cookies. Tarts, we have about 1,400 pieces. And candies, we have about 3,000. It is a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So, I make cookies for a living. How can I complain? I make people smile.
Santa Kahini had a big gingerbread project, so we were lucky to get some of the most beautiful, creative houses that the students there prepared.
Look over here, people are sledding at Eagle Crests.
The poor little guys are going to be so dizzy at the end of the night.
And over here, Harry's inside the Hogwarts Express. And over here, every dancer is inside the Chilkat Lodge. And over here, Twin Lakes is getting ready for some slippery ice. And there are lots of people showed up and lots of people who help. They even have elves. Do you like what you're doing right now?
Yes. Yeah, it's fun sometimes, but sometimes you have to pick people's garbages up, but it's still fun and there's lots of cookies.
And the governor's commissioners even help. Mr. Duncan, do you like your job?
Oh, I love my job. This is what I look forward to all year long for this day.
And here's the people everyone comes to see, the governor and his wife.
Merry Christmas to you.
I even got to shake their hands.
God bless your heart again. Thank you.
What do you think about being an interviewer?
I wish all the media hugged me like that.
What do you like best about this open house?
Oh, there's so many people that I haven't seen a lot of times since the year before. And we get to say hi and Merry Christmas, and everybody's so happy.
How do you feel about this being your last year as governor?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have mixed feelings. I've had such a wonderful time being governor, but at the same time, it's time for somebody else to come in. So I love the job, but it'll be good going home.
Which cookie do you like best?
Oh, I like the big chocolate ones the best.
What decoration do you like best?
Oh, I think the tree in there is just beautiful, and it's got all these beautiful ornaments and lights on it, and that always makes me feel the best about it.
Do you have an estimation about how many people's hands do you shake a year?
Well, I think it's going to be about 3,000.
Whoa, 3,000?
That's right. So I've been getting my arm in shape all this last month doing my squeeze exercises. Let me see if it works. Work?
Yeah. Which cookie do you like best?
Let's see. Maybe you should have asked me which cookie I don't like. And I don't think I have an answer for that.
And Mrs. Knowles even wears special shoes for the occasion.
They're black and they have Christmas lights on them. And I love to hear what the kids say when they go through the line. They say, "Oh, look at those shoes. They're neat."
Happy holidays, Alaska. For last week, I'm Callie Connerton. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you. That's our show for this week. Next week, we have more on the governor's new spending plan, and we take a look at a Christmas musical that has its roots in Alaska and is being performed in theaters across the country. For all of us here at Alaska Week, thank you for watching. I'm Dave Donaldson.